Yo dogs, how's it going? Today I want to talk about free will. Free will is kind of a slippery topic. In fact, anything relating to consciousness is a slippery topic, largely because people have different words to refer to the same things and then we all end up talking past each other. But it's also a very interesting subject, and good lord do people disagree on this. So let's cut to the chase and talk about it. Alright, so does free will truly exist or not? Now first of all, who the fuck is will and why should we free him? Free will is basically the idea that when you do something, right, you move your hand or you look at something or you say something, free will is the idea that you could have done something else, but you chose to do the thing that you did. You willed it to happen, and you did so freely. You, as an individual agent in the universe, have the ability to choose from a variety of different actions, potentially an infinite number of different actions, and you freely chose to do the one thing that you did. And my position on this is, no, that is definitely not how it works. Now, there's a few different components to this conversation. There's the nature of how the physical universe works. We can ask the question of, does the physical universe allow for free choices to happen? There's a separate question of, what is the internal conscious perception of what's happening, right? Like from your first person vantage point within your own consciousness, how and why does it really feel like you are freely choosing what you want to do? And third, I think there's also the topic of compatibilism, which you may or may not have heard of. We'll get to that. But for now, let's talk about the physical universe. Does the universe allow for free decisions to actually take place? Okay, well, mechanistically, let's think about how that would have to work. The brain is part of the physical world, so the neurons inside of your brain are just behaving in accordance with the laws of physics. You can dissect a brain and stimulate all the nerve cells individually. I mean, really, it is fairly similar to the artificial intelligence systems that we're building, just a huge amount more complicated in a biological human being. But still, in smaller animals, we've been able to map all the different connections between all the different neurons. On some level, the brain works by passing signals between cells. That's really all it is. So ultimately, a brain behaves mechanistically. They're made out of atoms and molecules and shit. Particles are bumping into each other, and those interactions cause things to happen. That's how everything works in the universe, and the physical matter composing a human brain is not exempt from those rules. Or at least, the only way for it to be exempt from those rules would be for some kind of immaterial thing that we can't measure to be having an effect on the neurons in the brain. But there's a few problems with this. First off, if it is affecting the neurons in the brain, we should be able to measure it, right? Like if a human soul is a thing that exists in a literal metaphysical kind of way, and it's really faffing about with whatever's happening in your brain causing you to do stuff, and you really are this soul thing, we should be able to somehow measure the soul. But guess what? That has happened 0 times, including that one that everyone brings up where a guy weighed people before and after they died, and they weighed slightly less after they died, and hardcore religious types are like, oh, that must be the weight of a human soul. No, I'm pretty sure it was like evaporation or something. Also, why would a soul weigh something? That seems like a weird assumption. Anyway, just think about all of this one layer up. Let's say that souls exist, and they're affecting the contents of the physical human brain to cause it to do things in alignment with what the soul wants to happen. So you are the soul, and the human body is like a flesh mech that you're piloting. Okay, quick question. How did you choose your soul? For real, like, if you are your soul, and the argument is, because I'm the soul, and the soul is free to do whatever it wants, and I'm just commanding the brain to do what I want, and then the brain is commanding the body to do what it wants. So I really am free. Okay, but just, let's say you like the color orange, and you don't like the color blue. Did you choose that? Now let's say there are 2 rooms, an orange one or a blue one, and you have the choice to go into one or the other, and you choose the orange one because you like orange. The choice isn't really yours if you were always destined to have the soul that you have, and that soul was always gonna like orange. The decision's only meaningful if you chose to have a soul that likes orange. Was there an infinitely long line of souls and you picked the one that liked orange and didn't like blue? No, you just are that way. Even if we say that souls exist conceptually, you don't choose which one you are, you just are that one. So you still ultimately have no choice over the things that you choose to do and choose not to do because you didn't have any influence over what soul it is that you have. This is a pretty classic philosophy issue where some reasoning that you have leads to an infinite regression where there is no obvious first mover. Like if you did choose your soul, then what are you? Because I thought you were your soul. So if you chose the one that you want, then you aren't even the soul. You're yet another thing. You're like a meta soul. Okay, but then what is that? What chose that? A meta soul? Like this, it's an infinite regression. If souls exist, on some level you have absolutely no choice over what it is that you want, which to me is a bit of a killer for free will. On top of the fact that from a physics perspective, having souls interacting with physical matter just doesn't seem to make any sense, or at the very least, there is 0 credible evidence for such thing ever having been observed. And there's a fucking monumental mountain of credible evidence to suggest that that's definitely not how it works, and the whole system of the brain is just mechanistic. Anyway, that's the soul argument, and that argument works if you're a person who's religious, but there's a lot of people who are secular who still believe in in free will. And I think when a secular person thinks that free will exists, they're usually talking about something to do with quantum mechanics. See, in classical physics, we tend to think that all the particles in the universe are doing what they're doing because of all the stuff that happened to those particles previously. See, when we say that every particle in the universe is just doing what it has to do based on the previous state of the universe, you know, it's like the entire universe is this giant pool table where one ball hits another ball and then that hits another ball, and ultimately, if you knew the starting positions of all the balls and you knew the velocity at which the first ball was going to hit the second ball, you could kind of work out everything downstream of there, right? If it's totally mechanistic, right? Totally deterministic. If the universe is deterministic, hypothetically, you could build a computer, upload the locations and velocities of every single particle in the solar system, and you could run the solar system forward for thousands, maybe millions of years, and have a perfectly accurate prediction of exactly what's going to happen in the future. But the issue with that is quantum mechanics. Now, I am definitely not an expert on quantum mechanics, but the general gist is that at the bottom layer, like the smallest particles that make up everything else, those particles don't just behave like pool balls. They basically have like a probability of being in a certain place at a certain time, going a certain velocity or whatever. And quantum mechanics calculations show that those quantum scale movements of particles really are random. You can't predict it. And those little deviations from what would happen deterministically are going to trickle upwards into the macroscopic world. So hypothetically, something that happens at the quantum scale could affect whether a neural impulse in a brain happens or not, and therefore could impact what you end up thinking. So if you believe in free will and you're a secular person, there's a good chance that the version of free will that you believe in is that somehow you, in open quotes, control what your brain is doing by influencing lots of little quantum fluctuations all over the place, which causes your brain to express certain signals, which causes your body to do what you want it to do. In fact, this even could be the means by which souls transmit themselves through the brain into the body and allow free will to happen. But the problem with this is that quantum mechanics really is random. Again, I don't claim to be a quantum mechanics expert, but I also don't think anyone who thinks that this is how souls work is a quantum mechanics expert either. My understanding is that we basically know for certain that it is impossible to predict how some certain quantum fluctuation is going to happen because it really is completely and utterly random. So essentially, if you're using this argument to argue for free will, you're essentially just saying that there's kind of a low-level static all over all of the decisions that you're making, all of the different impulses that are passing through your brain, and that random static noise in the system accounts for what you really are. The problem is, I don't think that's what free will is. If a quantum fluctuation causes you to make one decision and not another decision, that decision wasn't chosen by you. I would say that that decision is random. You've essentially decided to do that thing by flipping a coin. To me, introducing random noise into the signals that your brain has does nothing to make it seem more like free will is happening. That's not you controlling what happens, that's randomness determining what happens. Again, to me, this just doesn't check out. To me, that's just not what free will means, and I think I'm justified in having a definition that isn't met by that. I don't think that's crazy. I really do not think there are any good reasons whatsoever from a physics perspective why we should believe that free will exists. It just seems like a non-starter of an argument. But allow me to move on to the first-person conscious experience of having free will. This experience that we have where we feel like we're the ones at the helm freely making decisions. If we're not, then why do we feel like that? Why is it that I can sit here and just decide to do something crazy? We've all seen memes on Instagram where someone's doing some insane shit. You know, they're taking a shit at a train station dressed like Mickey Mouse while screaming their ABCs or whatever, and the comments are filled with people going, amazing use of free will. In fact, I'll be disappointed if the comment section below is not filled with people saying amazing use of free will. You're damn right it is, even though I don't actually have any. It feels like we can just decide to do crazy shit. So what the fuck, man? And I think this is why people argue for free will. Not because we really actually have it, not because people have really assessed the nature of the physical world and come to the conclusion rationally and sensibly that we have free will. No, it's because it just fucking feels like we do. But here's the thing, I hate to break it to you, but that in and of itself also doesn't actually make any sense. Sorry to interrupt, this is just a quick message to say, statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed, so I'll make you a deal, press the subscribe button and I won't come over to your house and do this. Alright, thanks, back to the video. This is a really important point because this is hard for people to understand, because consciousness itself is a fucking bizarre thing to try and understand. But really think about it. If you, in some sense, are this thing that is controlling your body and is also the thing which experience is happening to, and you're saying that you know that free will exists because it feels like you have free will. Okay, what is a feeling? A feeling is a type of perception, right? You think of yourself as this thing at the center of all these different fields of perception that you have. You've got the visual visual field, and you've got the auditory field, and you've got the olfactory field, and you've got the whatever else, right? You've got all these different fields of sensory information, and you, the self with free will, is the thing that all of those different fields of perception are happening to. But if you think that that self exists because it feels like it exists, that doesn't seem to logically make any sense. Feelings happen within the fields of perception. That is by definition where those things happen. If it feels like a self with free will exists outside of the fields of perception, that itself is just a feeling within perception. That doesn't suggest anything about the metaphysical architecture of consciousness. It can't. And I'd go as far as to say that if you really pay attention enough, you can actually perceive that you don't have free will. The illusion of free will is paper thin. Like, quick, think of a celebrity. Okay, have you imagined somebody? Okay, who is it and why did you choose them? Answer me! Okay, I can't actually hear you, so I'm gonna have to make up this conversation. But the conversation usually goes something like this. I thought of Steve Buscemi. Why did you think of Steve Buscemi? Because I saw him on TV recently. Why was it important that you saw him on TV recently? I just said pick a celebrity. It could have been someone that died 50 years ago. I don't know, that's just what came to mind. You saw lots of other people on TV recently. Why did you specifically think of Steve Buscemi? I don't know, man, I just chose Steve Buscemi. Why is this such a big deal? It matters for the thought experiment. You already took the kids, what more do you want from me? I'm trying, Carol! Okay, my point is that when I'm prompting you to think of a celebrity, you're not freely choosing from every celebrity that you've ever heard of. Your brain is making connections that you don't have any direct control of, and they just kind of produce people in front of you, in your mind's eye. You don't have any real choice over who it is that shows up. Now, you could have Steve Buscemi pop into your mind, and you're like, nah, not Steve Buscemi, and then it's The Rock, and you're like, nah, I'm not, nah. And then you're like, oh, I know, I'll go with Ben Stiller, because we're talking about free will, and he kind of looks like Sam Harris if both of his eyebrows were under control. But why did those particular names or faces pop into your head? And why did the criteria that you used to determine the final name that you decided on pop into your head? Ultimately, every thought that you think is just showing up. The only way for it to not be doing that is for you to think it before you think it. And again, this becomes an infinite regress problem, because for that to make sense, you'd have to think thoughts before you thought them. If you really pay attention, you can tell that the next thing you think is not actually under your control. And that also goes for every decision you make, because that's a kind of thought, and it therefore also extends to every voluntary action that you do. You're just along for the ride. Or, I mean, on a deeper level, there isn't even really a you along for the ride. There's just consciousness expressing the contents within it. That's kind of it. I think that's a sufficient description of what's going on. I don't think you need to add anything to it. If you're having a conversation with someone, ultimately, in the same way that the next thing that they say is a mystery to you until they say it, also the next thing that you think or say is a mystery to you until you think or say it. In basically exactly the same way. It's slightly more subtle to notice because of the layers of weird kind of sensory illusion that's going on, but ultimately that's what's happening. We just have this very flimsy feeling of us authoring everything, and it causes this societal desire for us to demand that we all acknowledge that free will definitely exists. It just doesn't. It just factually doesn't. Although that does bring me to compatibilism. Now, compatibilism is the idea that you can maintain the concept of free will at the same time as the physical universe being deterministic. Now, there's plenty of videos and articles that will let you go much deeper on this topic, but this is really, in my view, the last bastion of people who claim that free will exists with any leg to stand on whatsoever. And ultimately, the idea is that even if everything is predetermined, or I guess, if there's like quantum randomness or whatever else going on in the physical universe that precludes the existence of free will in the way that I've defined it in this video, we should still believe that free will exists, because you kind of effectively do still have a variety of options to choose from when you take some action of some kind. Even if the decision you make is ultimately determined entirely by the genes that you have and the environment you grew up in and the current conditions that you're experiencing, even then, we can still treat people like these agents in the universe that can make free decisions. To me, this is less of a belief about the facts of the metaphysics that's happening, and it's more a belief about the morals and ethics that we should have. And to that end, I essentially agree with it. I just don't think it's saying anything particularly deep. Like, I do think that things like individual freedoms are important for humans to be happy, right? I'm not saying that there should be some autocratic government that controls all of us and tells us all what to do because we don't have free will anyway. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I think people end up really hardcore on one side or the other of the argument for compatibilism based on maybe a slight miscommunication, because compatibilists, I think, are essentially saying you can do whatever you will. If you can will it, you are free to do it, to make decisions based on what you will your physical body to do. And I agree with the essence of that. It's not that I don't don't think you should be able to do what you will. It's that I don't think you can will what you will. I don't think you can choose to like the color orange. I don't think quantum mechanics allows your soul to possess your brain and allow you to make free decisions outside of the laws of physics. I don't think even that it really ultimately feels like you have free will if you really concentrate on it hard enough. But I do still think people should be held responsible for the actions that they take, even if those actions are, in the ultimate analysis, totally dependent on factors that they didn't control. Like, just because you didn't control your genetics and your upbringing and the specific conditions happening to you as you exist right now, doesn't mean that if you murder someone, you're not responsible for it. You are responsible for it. The you in question just being the group of atoms that resulted from the genes and experiences that this particular human has been subject to. I think as a society we can still act as if people are behaving as agents, even if ultimately they aren't. And I actually don't think that those two things are in conflict with each other, because one of the things is about doing what you will, and the other thing is about willing what you will. You can do what you will, you can't will what you will. Thank you for your attention. If your name's Will, you can crawl back into the will hole now. And as always, thanks to my elite level supporters, Thunderbolt 22A10, who fell off a ladder in the Black Eye Galaxy and may now be entitled to compensation, Nomad Greg, whose grandfather was an iguana, Andrew Mole, who's being pursued by a series of levitating orbs, John Bejarano, who once visited the Virgin Islands, now they're just called the Islands, JDK, who's got Asperger's, not the autism spectrum disorder, just a taint full of sandwiches, Mutantious Doom, who witnessed the deep mysteries of the universe and rates them a 7 out of 10, Stormester Ritter, who's mastered the power of the dodecahedron, Nikita Lurie, whose general zest for life could power a nation the size of France, Aaron Rowe, who has a possum in his pant leg, Bonk Chunk, who single-handedly reduced the population of his house to N-1 when he left for work this morning, that one boy who can kill a man in only 2 moves, first a masterfully executed karate chop, and second he shoots you in the face, and thanks to all my other supporters too. Don't forget to join the Patreon or the channel membership if you want to be featured in my video credits or chat on Discord, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Over and out.